Avengers Endgame was the culmination of years of filmmaking and universe building, so we kind of had a suspicion we'd have to suspend our disbelief more than usual. Marvel Studios had a lot of concepts to play with, including time travel and the quantum realm, but it seems like they took some serious liberties when it came to consistency. Today, we're going to be talking about the sneaky ways Marvel moved the plot along at the expense of its credibility. Pym Particles. Everyone knows that Hank Pym is responsible for Pym Particles, which are an important element for traversing the quantum realm and therefore being able to travel through time, collect the Infinity Stones, and undo the decimation. Considering the fact that the brilliant Hank Pym, his wife Janet Van Dyne, and his daughter Hope Van Dyne all got dusted in Ant-Man and the Wasp, this leaves all of his scientific achievements in the hands of Scott Lang. No, we didn't feel confident about that either, but it all worked out okay. Except that one of the plot points of Avengers Endgame involved the scarcity of Pym Particles. Scott was only able to collect enough Pym Particles to send each hero back in time a single time, and for 2 practice runs. This meant our heroes had to succeed, or else they would have no hope of defeating Thanos. Of course, they messed up and had to go back to the past to obtain more Pym Particles from a younger Hank himself. But why? Where was Hank's amazing shrinking laboratory? You know, the one with all of his equipment and resources in it? Surely that would have been helpful, especially when Bruce Banner was struggling to send Scott back in time without turning him into a baby. Lost love. There's no doubt that time travel is incredibly confusing, and we even saw some of our favorite heroes struggling with the concept in Avengers Endgame. Other than time travel, one of the mysteries of the MCU for quite some time has been, who did Peggy Carter marry? We know she dated Steve Rogers before he crashed into the ocean, and that she subsequently got married and had a family. Steve Rogers even smooched her great niece Sharon Carter, which was pretty weird, we have to admit, but who was Peggy's husband? Her solo series Agent of Carter seemed to hint that it was Daniel Sousa, although many of the details about him didn't quite seem to line up right. In Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Steve visits the Smithsonian Institute and learns she married an unidentified man who was saved from a Hydra blockade by Captain America in 1945. Why wouldn't Peggy Carter's husband be identified by name? If she has her own museum exhibit, why make it such a secret? Infinity Stones. There are plenty of items in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that don't get explained very well. Like, what's up with that spell Odin put on Mjolnir? How is worthiness actually defined? Worthy of what? Ruling Asgard? Wielding a hammer? Pulling off a cape? Who knows, because it only seems to be relevant at convenient plot-related moments. And then we have the Infinity Stones, which we've seen at various points throughout the MCU's history. From what we've seen, you're most certainly not supposed to just grab a hold of them with your bare mitts, and they usually come in some type of containment apparatus, like the Tesseract or the Orb. Oh, except in Endgame when we see the Ancient One just hand the Time Stone over to Bruce Banner without keeping it in the Eye of Agamotto. Can you just hold on to one with your bare hands if you're super duper strong like the Hulk or Thanos? And when Captain America takes the Space Stone back, it's just chilling in a suitcase. Is that really the safest way to transport an object of such immense power? It's almost like Marvel kept playing with the rules of the Infinity Stones instead of setting them in, well, stone. Vormir. And speaking of the Infinity Stones and their nebulous rules, what happened when Captain America returned the Soul Stone to Vormir? It seems like a lot should have gone down when he returned this particular Infinity Stone to the correct place and time. But by showing it off screen, Marvel Studios got to avoid answering any of the burning questions we have about this interaction. First of all, how awkward was it for Red Skull to have to greet Steve Rogers? Ah, hey buddy, remember those good times when we tried to destroy one another? Well, looks like you're busy being a spooky specter now, so that's great. And then there's the soul for a soul aspect of this particular Infinity Stone. Since he's putting the stone back, doesn't that mean he should get a refund? Shouldn't he have been able to bring Natasha Romanoff back to life? And the Russo brothers said that after Avengers Infinity War, Red Skull was freed. But does this mean he's now stuck on Vormir forever? We'll probably never know the answer to any of these questions because the Soul Stone exchange happened totally off-screen. Doomed. We have a whole lot of questions following our first watch of Avengers Endgame, like, is the MCU totally doomed? No, we're not talking about the superheroes who lost their lives during the movie, but rather something that the Ancient One said in a conversation with Bruce Banner. She explains her reluctance to part with the Time Stone by saying they're essential to maintaining the sanctity of the universe. Removing one Infinity Stone from its rightful place creates a new reality, which is missing an important tool in the fight against darkness. According to the Ancient One, the forces of darkness would overcome the world in the absence of the Infinity Stones. And we know that Marvel included this bit into the movie to explain why the Infinity Stones have to be returned to their respective timelines, and thus give Steve Rogers an excuse to return to the past and stay there. But does that mean the world is now doomed? After all, Thanos destroyed the Infinity Stones, and yet 5 years in the future, the world was fine overall, if at least a bit more depressing. Marvel may have snuck in this bit from the Ancient One to move the plot along, but it really raised more questions than it answered. Back to normal. We all know those who weren't dusted in the decimation kept right on living and aging in normal rates. Poor Black Widow had to suffer through the awkward phase of growing out a dye job just so we could keep track of how much time had passed since the decimation. But for those who were decimated and then returned, it seemed like no time had passed. After the decimation had been undone, we saw Cassie Lang still 5 years older than she was when we saw her in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Yet we saw Peter Parker return from post-decimation being exactly the same age and returning to high school with his pal Ned. It's great that some characters got a bit of a time jump, but did everyone in Peter's class get decimated? Wouldn't having half of the population miss out on 5 years of life cause massive issues when they suddenly reappear? Instead, everything looks happy and normal. Are the decimated really just going to keep on going like they didn't miss 5 years? Prequels. For a long time, Marvel Studios tried to avoid assigning specific dates to their movies. At first, we assumed each movie took place in the year it was released, but Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige eventually revealed this wasn't accurate. The timeline has changed and been messed up quite a few times, and they've intentionally tried to keep things vague. But obviously, Avengers Endgame involved tons of dates, making it tricky to continue with the next phase of Marvel movies, which is why Marvel Studios is focusing on prequels. The Black Widow movie is going to have to be a prequel for obvious reasons, and it's very likely that the upcoming Eternals movie will be one as well. They're also focusing on series starring characters like Loki, Scarlet Witch, and Vision, which take place prior to the events of Avengers Infinity War. Moving forward in the current timeline is going to be difficult, but Marvel Studios is taking its time by focusing on the past, at least for now. This may mean we won't get to see movies like Doctor Strange 2 or Black Panther 2 for quite some time. Nebula. Even following the events of Avengers Infinity War, there were tons of great heroes left in the MCU. We just didn't expect one of them to be Nebula. Don't get us wrong, she was always clear that she wanted to bring down Thanos, but that seemed to be her only real motivation. Going into Endgame, we wondered if she had what it took to truly be a hero, or if she was only cooperating towards a shared goal. But one of the highlights of the movie was Nebula learning how to make friends, displaying genuine compassion and proving how far she's come. To drive this point home, Marvel Studios had present-day Nebula interact with past Nebula, who was still working for Thanos. But once past Nebula had served her purpose of showcasing present Nebula's personal growth, they immediately killed her off. Why? Nebula shot her old self when she was no longer a threat, and despite showing she had the capacity to change. Clearly, this was just to avoid having two Nebulas running around the MCU, which would have admittedly been confusing. Pegasus. Someone over at Marvel Studios definitely has a thing for beautiful winged horses, and we're totally okay with that. Of course, we're talking about the incredible flying steed Valkyrie rides into battle on in the finale of Avengers Endgame. We've seen her ride a Pegasus before in Thor Ragnarok, but we were under the impression it came from somewhere on Asgard, which is now very destroyed. Where has this winged horse been? Was it on the Statesman and Valkyrie somehow managed to cram it into an escape pod with her? It seems just too convenient that Valkyrie can just summon a magical horse from the sky whenever she needs to look particularly awesome in battle. Although, as far as superpowers go, being able to summon a magical winged horse is a pretty good one. It's just never really explained at any point. Captain Marvel. We understand that it can be difficult to introduce a new character into an already established group dynamic, but we saw characters like Rocket Raccoon and Nebula working with more Earthbound heroes. So why was Captain Marvel missing in action for most of the movie? Yeah, we know that there are many planets out there who need help, and we think that that's a totally justifiable excuse for a lot of things. This explains where Carol Danvers has been since the movie Captain Marvel, and why she didn't hang around on Earth after the original confrontation with Thanos in the beginning of the movie. She was checking in and clearly available to show up and help when the team needed assistance. So where the heck was she when our heroes were going back in time to collect the Infinity Stones? This was just totally left out of the movie for no reason, and was never really explained. We're just told she's busy while everyone else is embarking on the only thing that really matters. Was Marvel Studios just hedging their bets in case the Captain Marvel movie was a flop at the box office? It was a great film that earned over $1 billion, so it was weird not to have more Carol Danvers in Avengers Endgame. What do you think about these questionable plot points of Avengers Endgame? Are they too convenient, or are you able to suspend your disbelief enough to enjoy the movie anyway? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. We'll see you next time.